I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. My name is Jake, and I've been married to my wife, Lindsay, for almost 10 years. We had what I believed was a solid relationship. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but we had built a life together. We even started a business with my then best friend, Mark. Everything seemed perfect on the surface, but as I would soon discover, life had other plans. Looking back, I can see that there were signs. Lindsay started coming home later than usual, always with some excuse about work or needing to meet clients. I worked hard to build my company, putting in late hours as well, but I always made time for her. Gradually, I noticed little things, her phone buzzing constantly, her being secretive about her messages, and her acting distant. I tried to brush it off as stress or fatigue from work, but a nagging feeling began to creep in. One night, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I noticed her phone buzzing again. It was late, and she had stepped into the shower. My curiosity got the better of me, and I picked it up. I hesitated, but then unlocked it. I don't know what I was expecting, but what I found was beyond anything I could have imagined. Text messages between her and Mark that were less than professional, flirty, intimate, and downright disgusting. My heart sank as I read each message, my adrenaline spiking. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I put the phone down and took a step back, trying to process the betrayal. I had trusted both of them. Mark was like a brother to me. I had never even considered the possibility that they could be involved. My mind raced with anger and disbelief. I knew I had to confront her, but I wanted to do it in a way that didn't let her know I was onto her. I wanted to see how deep this went and what kind of lies she might tell me. The next few days were a blur. I played along, pretending everything was normal. Lindsay was upbeat, talking about how she was going to help Mark with his new business venture. My gut twisted with every word. I decided to keep gathering evidence, so I downloaded a tracking app. On her phone. It felt wrong, but I wanted to know the truth, and I was willing to do whatever it took. Finally, the day came when I had what I needed. I tracked her movements to a hotel downtown. My heart raced as I drove there, each mile feeling like an eternity. I parked across the street, my hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. I watched as she entered the hotel, and I felt sick. I was about to confront the woman I loved, who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I waited for what felt like hours, gathering my thoughts and emotions. Finally, I couldn't wait any longer. I stormed inside, my heart pounding in my chest. I found her in the lobby, and just seeing her made my blood boil, but I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. I walked over to her, and she froze when she saw me. "Jake, what are you doing here?" She stammered, her eyes wide with shock. I didn't even respond. I just pulled out my phone and showed her the messages. I watched her face go pale as reality crashed down on her. She began to stutter, trying to come up with excuses, but I wasn't having any of it. "It's over, Lindsay. I know everything," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotion inside me. She tried to deny it, claiming it was just a friendship, but the lies fell flat. I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of losing everything she had. The confrontation spiraled into chaos as she begged me to understand, crying and insisting it was a mistake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a mistake. I stood there, my heart shattering with each tear that fell from her eyes. I felt the anger bubbling inside me, but I also felt the sadness. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on my shoulders, and I realized that this moment was going to change everything. How could I ever go back to the way things were? I had trusted her, and she had thrown it all away for a cheap thrill. As I left the hotel, I felt hollow. I didn't just lose my wife. I lost my trust, my friendship, and my sense of security in life. What was I going to do? Next, my mind raced through a million possibilities. I could forgive her, try to salvage our marriage, but honestly, how could I ever look at her the same way again? The emotional impact hit me harder than anything I had ever experienced before. I felt shattered, but I also felt a spark of determination. I was not going to let this slide. I needed to think, to plan my next steps carefully. I was going to make them both pay for what they did to me. I just needed to figure out how. I knew I had to be smart about this. I couldn't let emotions dictate my actions. I was ready to take control back, not just of my life, but of the situation at hand. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions but also plotting my revenge. Lindsay and Mark were about to learn how painful betrayal could be. I didn't just want to hurt them. I wanted to destroy everything they had built together. And so began my plan, an intricate web of revenge that would leave them both jobless and struggling. I would crush Mark's new company and leave Lindsay unemployed, forcing her to face the consequences of her actions head-on. The game was on and I was ready to play. Would you like me to continue with part 2? The days that followed my discovery felt like a twisted game of chess. I had to think strategically, weighing every move and countermove. I was no longer just a betrayed husband. I was a man on a mission. My goal was simple: destroy Mark's new company and leave Lindsay feeling the consequences of her decisions. I started by gathering as much information as I could about Mark's business. It was a tech startup that had received some investment and was beginning to gain traction in the local market. I reached out to a few contacts I had, people I had worked with before, and did some digging. It didn't take long before I found out there were several areas where the company was vulnerable. They were still figuring things out, and that made my heart race with excitement. One of the first things I discovered was that they were facing scrutiny over some of their product claims. There were whispers of false advertising, and I knew that if I could expose that, it could jeopardize their funding. I decided to take action. I contacted a few journalists I knew and hinted at an exposé. I didn't mention Mark by name, but I knew that if I dropped enough hints, the right people would connect the dots. Simultaneously, I started gathering evidence of their relationship: photos, texts, anything that would paint a clear picture of their betrayal. I wanted Lindsay to feel the sting of her decision, and I was determined to make sure that if this went public, it would hurt both of them equally. I couldn't decide yet how I would reveal this to her, but I wanted to be ready. As the days turned into weeks, I became consumed by my plan. I kept my distance from Lindsay, maintaining an air of normalcy at home while my mind churned with thoughts of revenge. She would come home, try to talk about her day, but I would respond with short answers, giving her nothing. I wanted her to feel the unease, the tension in the air. It was a small way of asserting my control back over the situation. One evening she came home with a bottle of wine, a desperate attempt to reconnect. I could see the realization in her eyes as she recognized the change in me. I felt a sense of satisfaction in knowing she was beginning to understand the weight of her actions. As we sat in silence, I watched her try to engage me with small talk. It was a pathetic facade, and I could see through it. The lying and cheating had stripped away any love I had for her. All that was left was a desire for revenge. Amidst this turmoil, I received a tip from one of my contacts that Mark was about to pitch to a group of potential investors. This was my chance. If I could disrupt that meeting, I could throw a wrench in their plans and expose their flaws directly to those who mattered. I immediately devised a plan to crash the pitch. I gathered more evidence of their relationship, compiling it into a neat dossier to present if the opportunity arose. The day of the pitch arrived, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. I dressed sharply, wanting to appear like a serious businessman rather than a vengeful husband. I arrived at the venue early, scouting the place out and waiting for the moment to make my move. My plan was to be casual, blend in with the crowd, and then drop the bombshell when they least expected it. As I waited, I watched the attendees arrive, noting who was there and how each person interacted with Mark. I could see the excitement on his face, the confidence radiating from him as he prepared to present. He had no idea what was coming. When the moment finally arrived and Mark took the stage, I moved to the front, standing just off to the side, ready to make my presence known. Mark began his presentation, showcasing the company's latest innovations and the potential impact on the market. The audience seemed captivated, but I knew I had to act at just the right moment. As he reached a high point in the pitch, I stepped forward, interrupting him. "Excuse me, everyone," I called out, my voice cutting through the air. The room fell silent and Mark's face turned pale as he recognized me. "This is not just about business," I continued, holding up the evidence I had compiled. "This is about betrayal. Lindsay, my wife, is involved with Mark, and this company's foundation is built on lies. Gasps echoed through the room, and I saw a mix of shock and confusion on the faces of the investors. Mark stammered, trying to regain control. "Jake, this isn't," I cut him off, turning my attention to the crowd. "You all deserve to know the truth. This is the man you're investing in, a man who betrays his friends and partners. I have proof," I said, waving the documents in the air. I could see the investors shifting uncomfortably, their interest in Mark's pitch waning. Some were taking pictures, others whispering among themselves. I felt a surge of power. I had turned the tables. I was no longer the victim, but the one exposing the truth. After a few moments of stunned silence, I walked out of the room, leaving chaos in my wake. I didn't stay to witness the fallout. I didn't need to. I knew the damage was done. My heart raced as I stepped outside and took a deep breath of fresh air. I had confronted the situation head-on and struck a blow against both Lindsay and Mark. The aftermath of that day was swift. I got calls and messages from friends who had heard about the disruption. Word spread quickly, and I watched from a distance as news outlets picked up the story, reporting on the scandal. Mark's investors were pulling out, and I knew within a week his company would be in serious trouble. And then there was Lindsay. I could only imagine the chaos that had erupted at home. I was reveling in the sweet taste of revenge, but it also brought a sense of emptiness. What had I become? This wasn't just about hurting them. It was also about finding a way to deal with my own pain. I went home that night, knowing I had to face the music eventually. Lindsay would be waiting, and I had to confront her about everything. She had to understand the full impact of her choices. As I lay in bed that night, adrenaline still coursing through me, I realized that my actions had consequences far beyond what I had initially anticipated. This wasn't just a revenge story. It was a reflection of my own pain, a journey of deep betrayal that I never wanted to take. I had crossed a line, and now I had to face what came next. Would you like me to continue with part 3? When I returned home after that chaotic day, the atmosphere felt thick with tension. The front door creaked ominously as I stepped inside, and I was greeted by an unsettling silence. Lindsay was sitting on the couch, her face pale and drawn, clutching her phone as if it were a lifeline. I could see the panic in her eyes, and for a moment I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the anger that surged through me. "Jake, what were you thinking?" she exclaimed as I walked in, her voice trembling. "You can't just barge in there and ruin everything." I closed the door behind me, deliberately taking my time to respond. "Ruin everything or expose the truth," I replied, my tone cold. "You think you can betray me and just carry on like nothing happened, like I'm not supposed to feel anything?" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't want it to come to this. It was a mistake, Jake. I never meant to hurt you." "A mistake," I spat, my voice rising. "You think sleeping with my best friend is a mistake? You think lying to my face day after day is a mistake?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "You didn't just betray me, Lindsay. You betrayed everything we built together." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. "No, I'm done listening to your excuses. You had your chance to come clean and you chose to lie. Now look where we are." Tension crackled in the air. I could see the fight draining out of her as she sank back into the couch, her eyes fixed on the floor. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to understand the consequences of your actions. I want you to feel what it's like to lose everything because you were too selfish to think about anyone but yourself," I replied, my voice steadier now. "Mark's company is failing, and soon enough you'll be out of a job too. That's what you wanted, right? To throw your life away for a thrill." The realization hit her like a cold slap in the face. You did this," she stammered, her eyes widening in disbelief. "You went after him." I nodded, feeling a surge of satisfaction. "You think I would? You made your bed and now you'll lie in it. I'm not going to let you or him just walk away unscathed." Lindsay's expression shifted, morphing from disbelief to anger. "You're being petty, Jake. You think this is going to make you feel better. You're just hurting yourself in the process." "Petty, maybe. But you don't get to lecture me about being hurtful. You made your choice, Lindsay. This is the path you chose," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not going to stand by while you ruin everything we had. You wanted to play with fire and now you're getting burned." She burst into tears, and despite my anger, I felt a pang of sadness for the woman I once loved. But I couldn't allow myself to feel pity. I had to stay strong, to remind myself of why I was doing this. The betrayal was too deep, and I had already committed to this path. "Do you think I want this?" She cried. "I thought we could work things out. I thought we could fix it." "Work things out?" I echoed incredulously. "You think after everything that's happened we can just go back to how things were? You really thought I'd just forgive you and pretend nothing happened? You're delusional." Lindsay's sobs became more desperate as she buried her face in her hands. I felt a sick mixture of satisfaction and guilt. I didn't enjoy seeing her in such pain, but I also knew that she had to face the reality of her choices. I refused to let her off the hook easily. "I want a divorce," I stated flatly, my resolve firm. "There's no going back for us, we're done." Her head shot up and the shock on her face was palpable. "You can't be serious," she exclaimed. "We've been together for too long, you're just angry right now." "Angry, yes, but more than that, I'm done. This isn't something I can just forget about." "You destroyed my trust, Lindsay. You destroyed us." I replied, my heart heavy. She tried to argue, to plead for another chance, but I was resolute. I stood up, ready to walk away from the wreckage of what was once our marriage. I couldn't keep dragging this out. I needed to step away for my own mental health. As I turned to leave, Lindsay called out to me, her voice breaking. "Jake, please don't do this. I can change. I'll do whatever it takes." But her words fell on deaf ears. I walked out of the room, leaving her cries behind me. I felt a sense of liberation mixed with grief. I was finally taking control of my life, but it came at a steep price. In the days that followed, I began the process of separating our lives. I contacted a lawyer to help me navigate the divorce, and I started making plans to ensure that she wouldn't have any claim over the business we built together. I was determined to protect what I had worked so hard for. Meanwhile, Mark's downfall continued. News of the scandal spread like wildfire, and I watched as his company crumbled under the pressure. Investors were pulling out, and soon enough, the startup that had once seemed so promising was facing bankruptcy. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction watching it all play out. But in the quiet moments when the adrenaline of revenge faded, I couldn't shake the emptiness that lingered. This wasn't how I wanted my life to be. I had taken vengeance, but it came with a cost. I lost not only my wife but the life we had built together. I realized that while revenge felt good in the short term, it wouldn't bring me the closure I needed. I had to find a way to heal from this betrayal, to move forward with my life without being consumed by anger. I began to focus on rebuilding, not just my business but my own sense of self. I started exercising more, spending time with friends, and even picked up a new hobby. Little by little, I was reclaiming my life, but I knew that the scars of this experience would take time to heal. This was my journey now, and while revenge had provided a temporary thrill, it was the path of healing and self-discovery that I needed to embrace. Would you like me to continue with part 4? As I settled into this new chapter of my life, I realized that the road to healing was not going to be a straight line. It was filled with unexpected turns, moments of doubt, and reminders of the past that could easily trigger old wounds. But I was determined to keep moving forward. With the divorce process underway and Mark's company on the brink of collapse, I focused on putting the pieces back together. The first thing I did was immerse myself in work. I poured my energy into the business, which had been the backbone of my life for years. I started exploring new avenues for growth and innovation, seeking ways to pivot and expand my reach. My team rallied around me, providing support and a sense of camaraderie that I desperately needed. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, as if every hour spent laboring over my company was a step toward reclaiming my autonomy. However, the emotional toll of my recent experiences still lingered. I had my good days and my bad days. There were nights when I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, haunted by memories of Lindsay and the life we had shared. I missed the laughter and the comfort of having someone by my side, but then I reminded myself of the betrayal, the lies, and the pain. It was a constant battle between longing for the past and embracing the freedom of my present. I started seeing a therapist, which was one of the best decisions I ever made. Talking through my feelings with someone who wasn't involved in the situation helped me gain clarity. I learned to process my emotions rather than bury them. I began to understand that it was okay to grieve the loss of my marriage while also recognizing that it wasn't a healthy relationship. My therapist helped me see that I was not defined by Lindsay's actions. I was rebuilding my identity, one brick at a time. One afternoon, while I was meeting with my lawyer to discuss the finalization of the divorce, I received a text from Mark. I hadn't heard from him since the pitch incident, and part of me was surprised to see his name pop up on my phone. I hesitated before opening it, my heart racing. "Jake," the message read, "I know this is the last thing you want to hear, but I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" I felt a surge of anger at the audacity of him reaching out. After everything that had happened, how could he think I would want to meet? But then I thought about all the chaos I had caused in his life. Maybe he wanted to apologize. Maybe he was looking for closure just like I was. I decided to entertain the idea of meeting, if only to hear what he had to say. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop, a neutral ground where tempers could hopefully remain in check. When I arrived, I saw Mark sitting at a table, his head down as he scrolled through his phone. He looked stressed, more so than I had ever seen him. As I approached, he looked up and I could see the weight of regret etched on his face. "Hey," I said, not bothering to hide my skepticism. "What's this about?" He took a deep breath, his fingers tapping nervously against the table. "I wanted to apologize for everything. I messed up, Jake. I didn't think about the consequences. I was stupid." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by his candor. "You think an apology is going to fix everything? You ruined my life, Mark." "I know, and I deserve whatever you have to say," he continued, his voice earnest. "But I want you to know that I regret it. It was a moment of weakness and I lost everything because of it. I lost my company, my reputation, and my friendship with you." Hearing him admit that felt foreign. I had spent so long reveling in my revenge that I hadn't anticipated the remorse he might feel. "Why should I believe you?" I asked, crossing my arms. "You might just be playing the victim now that things have gone south for you." He nodded, acknowledging my skepticism. "You're right. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see me again. But I wanted to be upfront about how badly I messed up. I let my desires blind me and I hurt everyone in the process." I looked at him, weighing his words. It was hard to reconcile the man sitting before me with the betrayer I had come to despise. But was it worth my time to delve into a conversation about reconciliation? Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind him of all the pain he caused, but the other part recognized that harboring this anger was exhausting. "I don't want to dwell on the past anymore," I said finally, focusing on my own healing. "You've lost everything, and I hope this serves as a wake-up call for you. I may not ever trust you again, but if you're genuinely sorry, then learn from this." Mark looked relieved, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "That's all I can ask for. I need to make things right in my life, starting from scratch." We parted ways, and I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I didn't know what the future held for Mark, but I hoped he would take the lessons from this experience to heart, as I was trying to do myself. It was a reminder that while revenge had felt good, the journey toward healing was where I truly needed to focus my energy. With renewed determination, I began to embrace life outside of my past. I spent more time with friends, rediscovering old hobbies, and even started dating again, slowly and cautiously. I wasn't ready to jump into a serious relationship, but I wanted to open myself up to new possibilities. The process wasn't easy. I still had moments of vulnerability where the pain would creep back in. But each day felt like a step toward reclaiming my life, toward finding joy again. I learned to appreciate the little things: a sunny day, laughter with friends, the thrill of new experiences. Every positive moment was a small victory against the backdrop of betrayal. Through therapy and introspection, I realized that while I had been hurt, I refused to let that define me. I was not merely a victim, I was redefining my own narrative. There was life after betrayal, and I was determined to find my way back to happiness, no matter how long it took. The emotional journey had taught me resilience, and I emerged stronger, more self-aware, and ready to face whatever came next. Would you like me to continue with part 5? As the weeks turned into months, I found a rhythm in my new life. The chaos of the past began to fade into a distant memory, replaced by the small joys that came from living in the present. I had made significant strides in my business, pulling in new clients who appreciated my vision and dedication. I felt invigorated, a sense of purpose surging through me that I hadn't felt in a long time. Despite the progress, there were still moments where the shadows of my previous life crept back in. I'd occasionally see couples together, laughing over dinner, and it would hit me how much I missed the companionship I once had with Lindsay. But I also recognized that the love we shared was tainted by betrayal. I had to remind myself that it was okay to feel nostalgic while holding firm to the truth of my situation. One beautiful Saturday afternoon, I decided to take a hike along a nearby trail that I had always loved. It was a favorite spot of mine, a place where I could think and reflect. As I walked through the trees, surrounded by nature's tranquility, I found a sense of peace washing over me. I paused at a clearing, taking in the view, the vibrant colors of the leaves, the distant mountains, the chirping of birds. It felt like a reset. As I sat on a rock, I thought about how far I'd come since the day I discovered Lindsay's betrayal. I had taken control of my life, and I was proud of the person I was becoming. My therapist had taught me the importance of self-reflection, and I knew that I had emerged from this experience with a clearer understanding of what I wanted in life. At that moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from an unknown number. My heart sank as I opened it. It was a picture of Lindsay, looking disheveled and desperate, standing on the steps of our old home with a pleading look on her face. The caption read, "Can we please talk? I miss you." I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Part of me was annoyed that she thought she could just slide back into my life after everything that had happened. But another part of me felt a hint of sympathy. I had moved on, and I knew I had to hold my ground. But a small voice in my head wondered if perhaps this was an opportunity for closure. After pondering for a moment, I decided to respond, but not in a way that would reopen old wounds. I texted back, "I'm not interested in getting back together, Lindsay. You made your choices and I've moved on. I hope you find what you're looking for." I hit send, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. I didn't want to be cruel, but I also didn't want to give her false hope. The past was behind me, and I wasn't about to allow it to define my future. Later that week, as I was working late at the office, I received another unexpected message, this time from Mark. "Hey Jake, I know this is weird, but I'd like to talk. Can we meet?" I stared at the screen, taken aback. After I had exposed the truth, I figured he would have avoided me altogether, but the curiosity was there. Maybe he wanted to apologize again or discuss something related to his downfall. I reluctantly agreed to meet, still wary of his intentions. We arranged to meet at a diner downtown, a casual spot where we wouldn't attract much attention. As I sat in a booth, nursing my coffee, I felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. When Mark walked in, he looked different, more disheveled, his eyes tired and worn. I gestured for him to join me, and he slid into the seat across from me. "Hey, thanks for meeting," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I appreciate it." I nodded, waiting for him to elaborate. "I wanted to apologize again for everything that happened. I've had a lot of time to think, and I realize how my actions destroyed everything, my business, my friendships, and especially your marriage. I really messed up, man." His sincerity was hard to ignore. I could see the regret etched on his face, and it reminded me of my own struggles with the past. "Yeah, you did," I said bluntly, "but I'm not here to rehash it all. What do you really want?" "I'm in the process of rebuilding my life, my career. It's tough. I've lost everything, and I'm trying to piece together what's left," he confessed. "I know I don't deserve your sympathy, but I wanted to ask if you consider collaborating on a project together. Something fresh, something that could benefit both of us." I was taken aback by the proposition. Working with Mark again seemed like a ridiculous idea, especially after everything that had happened. But then I thought about it. Could this be an opportunity to turn the page? Could a collaboration mean I was moving forward rather than being stuck in the past? Why would I want to work with you? I challenged, keeping my guard up. You betrayed me and I lost everything because of it. I get that, he replied, a hint of desperation in his voice. But I've learned my lesson and I want to make it right not just for me, but for you too. I know I can bring something valuable to the table. I mulled it over. I had spent so long focused on revenge and anger, but maybe there was a chance for growth here. Maybe I could use this opportunity to carve out a new path for myself. But could I genuinely trust him again? I need time to think, I finally replied, my heart racing with uncertainty. This is a lot to process. He nodded, understanding the weight of my words. I get it. Just know that I'm serious about making amends. I'll reach out in a few days. As he left the diner, I felt a mix of apprehension and hope. This was uncharted territory, and I had to decide whether I wanted to open that door again. That night, I lay in bed, wrestling with the idea of collaboration. I had poured so much energy into revenge and healing, but perhaps it was time to channel that energy into something constructive. The following days passed in a blur as I continued to weigh the pros and cons of working with Mark. I found myself drawn to the idea of turning a painful chapter into something positive, but the memories of betrayal lingered. Eventually, I decided to give Mark a chance. Not because I trusted him completely, but because I was ready to move beyond the hurt. I would approach this collaboration with caution, keeping my eyes wide open. If we could create something from the ashes of our past mistakes, it would be a testament to how far we had both come. As I picked up the phone to text him, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. I was choosing to move forward, and that was a victory in itself. I knew there would still be obstacles ahead, but I was ready to face them head on. With every step, I felt stronger, and I knew that the journey would only get better from here. Would you like me to continue with part 6? After I sent the message to Mark, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. It was time to put aside past grievances and focus on what lay ahead. I was ready to embrace a new chapter, despite the lingering doubts in the back of my mind. We agreed to meet again, this time to discuss the specifics of our potential collaboration. As we sat across from each other in a co-working space filled with bright, inspiring energy, I felt the tension from our previous encounters start to dissolve. We began brainstorming ideas, and I was surprised by how easily we fell into a rhythm. We shared laughter and enthusiasm as we talked about the possibilities of creating something fresh, something that could redefine both our paths. As the days turned into weeks, we worked tirelessly on our project. It felt invigorating to channel our energies into constructive pursuits rather than dwelling on past mistakes. We harnessed our individual strengths, Mark's technical expertise and my business acumen, and together we began to map out a plan that could not only help us recover financially, but also restore our reputations in the industry. Despite our budding partnership, I was still guarded. There were times when the shadows of our past would creep in, and I would catch myself questioning Mark's motives. But I realized that trust is built over time, and I was willing to give him a chance. Each successful brainstorming session, every completed milestone, moved us a little closer to rebuilding what was lost, both personally and professionally. Through this collaboration, I also started to gain insight into Mark's journey. He opened up about the impact of his choices, sharing how he had hit rock bottom after our fallout. He explained how losing everything had forced him to confront his flaws and reevaluate the kind of person he wanted to be. Listening to him, I started to see the man behind the mistakes, a flawed individual trying to make amends. Our project began to take shape, and soon we were ready to pitch it to investors. I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as we prepared for the big day. It wasn't just about the business, it was about redemption for both of us. As I stood in front of the panel of investors, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. I wasn't just standing for myself, I was standing for the journey of healing I had undertaken. The pitch went well. We showcased our vision, and when we finished, the investors were impressed. They asked insightful questions and engaged with our ideas. I could see Mark's nervousness melt away as we navigated through the presentation. It was exhilarating to be working together for something meaningful again. A week later, we received news that the investors wanted to fund our project. It felt like a win, not just for the business, but for both of us. We had turned a dark chapter into a promising new beginning. As we celebrated with a couple of drinks at a nearby bar, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. "Cheers to new beginnings," Mark said, raising his glass, and I clinked mine against his, feeling a sense of camaraderie that had been absent for so long. But even as I celebrated, I knew I still had work to do on my own emotional journey. I realized that while collaboration with Mark had helped me confront my past, it was essential to focus on my own healing. I began attending workshops, exploring new avenues for personal growth, and connecting more with friends and family who had provided unwavering support throughout my struggles. Those connections became my lifelines, grounding me as I navigated this new phase of life. I was determined to cultivate healthy relationships moving forward, ones that were built on honesty and trust. I wanted to ensure that I would never find myself in a situation like I had with Lindsay again. Months passed, and our project began to gain traction. The business grew steadily, and I felt proud of what we had accomplished together. Mark and I developed a dynamic partnership, one that was rooted in mutual respect and understanding. As we moved forward, I saw how the experience had changed us both for the better. One day, I received a message from Lindsay again. This time, it was different. She expressed her apologies more sincerely and acknowledged the damage she had caused. She mentioned she had been going through therapy herself and was working on becoming a better person. I read her words, feeling a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a strange sense of closure. I responded kindly but firmly, letting her know I was happy to hear she was working on herself but that I had moved on with my life. It was a significant moment for me. I realized that forgiving her, even if I didn't want to rekindle a relationship, was important for my own peace of mind. I was no longer shackled by the bitterness of the past. I felt liberated, unburdened. As we continued to build our business, I began to embrace the idea that life is a series of choices, and even the worst decisions can lead to unexpected growth. I learned that while betrayal can be devastating, it can also provide an opportunity to reinvent oneself. Looking back, I could see that the journey had shaped me in ways I never anticipated. I had transformed my pain into power, and I was no longer defined by the actions of others. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, a future filled with potential, resilience, and new beginnings. With newfound strength, I stepped out of the shadows of my past, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Redemption, it seemed, was not only possible but also a powerful catalyst for change. Life was moving forward, and I was finally living it on my own terms.